The wind howled through the cracked window of the bus station, slicing through Clara's thin jacket like a knife. She clutched her baby, Lily, tighter to her chest, the infant's wails piercing the empty terminal. Clara's breath fogged in the frigid air, her hands trembling as she tried to soothe her 6-month Indianapolis, Indiana was no place to be stranded in December, especially not with a baby who hadn't eaten in hours. Clara's eyes darted to the clock on the wall. 11:47 p.m. The last bus was gone, and the next wouldn't come until morning. Her stomach twisted not from hunger, though that gnawed at her too, but from the weight of eyes she could feel on her, judging her, dismissing her. She was 24, but the lines on her face told a story far older. Her dark hair was matted from days without a proper wash, and her sneakers were soaked through from the slush outside. Lily's cries grew louder, desperate, and Clara rocked her gently, whispering, "Shh, baby, it's okay. Mama's here." But was she? Clara felt like a ghost, invisible to the world except for the occasional glance of pity or disdain from strangers passing through the station. She'd been here for hours, waiting for a miracle she wasn't sure would come. It hadn't always been like this. Just a year ago, Clara had a job, a tiny apartment, and a plan. She was a cashier at a grocery store, saving every penny for Lily's future. But then came the layoffs, the eviction, and the slow unraveling of everything she'd fought for. Now, she was here with a backpack holding 2 diapers, a half-empty bottle of formula, and a crumpled bus ticket to nowhere. She'd been heading to her cousin's place in Chicago, hoping for a fresh start, but the ticket clerk had turned her away. "Invalid ticket," he'd said, barely looking at her. "Must have been a glitch when you bought it online. Next in line." Clara had stood there, stunned, as the line moved past her. She wanted to scream, to beg, but pity or maybe shame kept her silent. She'd shuffled to a bench in the corner, Lily's cries the only sound louder than the storm outside. A woman in a fur coat had muttered, "Some people shouldn't have kids," as she hurried by, and Clara's cheeks burned. She wanted to shout back, to tell them she was trying, that she loved Lily more than her own life, but the words stuck in her throat. The station was nearly empty now, save for a janitor sweeping in the distance and a man in a gray coat reading a newspaper. Clara's eyes stung, not from the cold, but from the weight of it all. She was alone, and the world felt like it had turned its back on her. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to The Kind Story, where kindness always finds a way, she imagined someone saying, though no one was there to care. Clara's life hadn't always been a fight, but it felt like one now. The injustice of it all wasn't loud or dramatic, it was quiet, creeping, like frost on a window pane. It started with the layoffs at the grocery store. "Budget cuts," her manager had said, avoiding her eyes. Clara had been a model employee, always on time, always smiling, even when customers snapped at her. But it didn't matter. She was let go with a week's pay and a letter of recommendation she couldn't use. Then came the eviction. Her landlord, a man with a permanent scowl, had given her 2 weeks to pay the back rent. "You're a nice girl, Clara, but I've got bills too," he'd said, as if her struggle was less real than his. She'd begged for time, promising to find a way, but he'd changed the locks while she was at the library applying for jobs. Her things, Lily's crib, her clothes, the little stuffed elephant Lily loved were gone, left in a dumpster behind the building. Clara had salvaged what she could, stuffing a backpack with essentials, but it wasn't enough. The worst came after, in moments no one saw. At the shelter, a worker had scolded her for not signing up for a bed in time, as if she'd meant to sleep on the street with a baby. "You need to plan better," the woman had said, her voice sharp. Clara wanted to scream that she was trying, that she'd called every shelter in the city, but the words died in her mouth. Instead, she'd nodded, apologized, and walked away, Lily's tiny hand clutching her finger. At the bus station, the cruelty was subtler, but no less cutting. The ticket clerk's dismissal had been a blow, but the glances from strangers hurt more. A man in a suit had looked at her like she was trash, his eyes skimming over her and Lily as if they were a problem to be avoided. A woman with a designer purse had whispered to her friend, loud enough for Clara to hear, "Why doesn't she just get a job?" Clara's heart sank. She'd applied to dozens of Places gas stations, diners, retail stores, but no one called back. Her phone was dead now, and she had no way to check for responses. Lily's cries grew weaker, and Clara's panic rose. The formula was almost gone, and she had no money for more. She'd tried to breastfeed, but stress and hunger had dried her up weeks ago. She felt like a failure, not just as a mother, but as a human being. "I'm so sorry, baby," she whispered, tears slipping down her cheeks. The janitor glanced over, his broom pausing, but he said nothing and went back to work. Clara felt the weight of her invisibility, the way the world seemed to look through her. She remembered her mother's words from years ago. "You're stronger than you know, Clara." But she didn't feel strong. She felt broken, like a glass someone had dropped and left to shatter. The cold seeped into her bones, and Lily's whimpers were a knife in her heart. She didn't know how much longer she could keep going. The man in the gray coat folded his newspaper and stood, stretching his arms. Clara barely noticed him at first, too focused on keeping Lily warm. He was older, maybe in his late 60s, with a face weathered by time, but kind eyes that crinkled at the corners. He wore a wool scarf and a worn leather jacket, the kind that looked like it had seen decades of winters. He glanced at Clara, then at Lily, and something in his expression shifted not pity, but something softer, like recognition. He walked over slowly, his boots clicking on the tile floor. Clara tensed, expecting another lecture or judgment. Instead, he stopped a few feet away and said, "Cold night, isn't it?" His voice was gentle, like he was talking to an old friend. Clara nodded, unsure what to say. She wasn't used to kindness anymore. "Name's Henry," he said, crouching slightly to meet her eyes. "And who's this little one?" He smiled at Lily, who was still fussing but quieter now, as if sensing the shift in the air. "Lily," Clara said, her voice barely above a whisper. She held her daughter closer, protective but curious. "Lily's a beautiful name," Henry said. He reached into his bag and pulled out a thermos. "I've got some hot tea here. Not much, but it's warm. You look like you could use it." He unscrewed the cap, poured a small amount into the lid, and held it out to her. Clara hesitated. She'd learned to be wary of strangers, especially men offering help, but Henry's eyes were steady, not demanding anything, just offering. She took the cup, her fingers brushing against the warm metal. The tea smelled faintly of chamomile, and she sipped it slowly, the warmth spreading through her chest. "Thank you," she said, her voice cracking. Henry nodded, then reached into his bag again. "Got something else," he said, pulling out a small packet of crackers and a tiny jar of peanut butter. "It's not gourmet, but it's something, for you and the little one." He set them on the bench beside her, careful not to invade her space. Clara's eyes filled with tears. It was such a small gesture, but it felt like a lifeline. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice trembling. Henry shrugged, a small smile playing on his lips. I've been where you are. Not exactly, but close enough. Someone helped me once, and I promised I'd pass it on. He paused, then added, You're doing your best, aren't you? Clara nodded, tears spilling over. For the first time in weeks, someone saw her not as a problem, but as a person. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to The Kind Story, where kindness always finds a way, she thought, as if the words could anchor this moment. Henry sat on the bench across from her, keeping his distance but close enough to talk. Clara opened the crackers and spread a bit of peanut butter on one, eating slowly to make it last. She broke off a tiny piece and softened it with her fingers, testing it for Lily, who took it eagerly. The baby's cries faded, replaced by soft coos, and Clara's heart eased just a little. You headed somewhere? Henry asked, his tone casual but kind. Chicago? Clara said. My cousin lives there. She said we could stay with her, start over, but the ticket… She trailed off, embarrassed. Henry nodded, not pressing her for details. Chicago's a good city. Lots of opportunity. I used to live there years ago. He leaned back, his eyes distant. Lost my job, my place, everything. Thought I'd never climb out of that hole. But someone gave me a chance, and it changed everything. Clara looked at him, curious despite herself. Who was it? A diner owner, Henry said. Gave me a job washing dishes, no questions asked. Didn't care that I looked like I'd been sleeping in a park. He just saw someone who needed a break. He chuckled softly. I worked there for 10 years, saved up, got back on my feet, never forgot him. Clara listened, the story settling over her like a warm blanket. She wanted to believe in second chances, but trust came hard these days. Still, Henry's voice was steady, his presence calm, and she found herself relaxing, just a little. What's your story? Henry asked, not prying, just curious. Clara hesitated, then spoke. I had a job, a place, then it all fell apart. Layoffs, eviction. I'm trying to keep Lily safe, but it's hard. Everyone looks at me like I'm nothing. Her voice broke and she looked down, ashamed. Henry leaned forward slightly. You're not nothing. You're a mother fighting for your kid. That's everything. His words were simple, but they hit her like a wave, washing away some of the shame. For a moment, they sat in silence, the only sound Lily's soft breathing. Clara felt something shift inside her, a tiny spark of hope. Have you ever felt seen by a complete stranger when no one else cared? She looked at Henry, his kind eyes meeting hers, and for the first time in months, she didn't feel alone. The station clock ticked past midnight, and the storm outside began to quiet. Clara finished the last of the crackers, her stomach still hungry but less desperate. Henry stood, glancing at the ticket counter, which was now staffed by a new clerk, a woman with gray hair and a tired but kind face. Come with me, Henry said, his voice gentle but firm. Clara hesitated, then followed, holding Lily close. Henry approached the counter and leaned in, speaking quietly to the clerk. Clara couldn't hear everything, but she caught fragments. Mistake with her ticket, headed to Chicago. Can you check? The clerk typed something into her computer, her brow furrowing. Looks like a system error, she said after a moment. The ticket was valid, just didn't scan right. I can reissue it for the 6 a.m. bus. She looked at Clara, her eyes softening. You and your baby will get to Chicago, don't worry. Clara's breath caught. Thank you, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. The clerk nodded, printing a new ticket and sliding it across the counter. Henry turned to Clara, a small smile on his face. You'll be okay, he said. Just keep going. You're stronger than you know." Clara clutched the ticket, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. "You don't have to," Henry replied. "Just take care of that little girl. That's enough." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small card with a phone number. "This is a friend of mine in Chicago, runs a community center. They help folks get back on their feet, jobs, housing, daycare. Give her a call when you get there." Clara took the card, her hands shaking. It was more than she dared to hope for a chance, a real chance. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to the Kind Story where kindness always finds a way, she thought, the words feeling like a promise now. As Henry walked away, disappearing into the snowy night, Clara sat back on the bench, Lily asleep in her arms. The station felt warmer, not from the heat, but from the spark of hope Henry had lit. She looked at the ticket, then at the card, and for the first time in months, she believed tomorrow might be better. The world hadn't changed, but someone had seen her, had cared enough to act. And that small act of kindness was enough to remind her that she wasn't alone, that she was still fighting, and that she would keep going for Lily, for herself, and for the chance at a new beginning. Sometimes, all it takes is one person to see you, to remind you that you're human, that you matter. Clara held Lily close, whispering, "We're going to be okay, baby, I promise." And in the quiet of the station, with the storm fading outside, she felt the truth of those words settle in her heart. Disclaimer: this story was originally created for the Kind Story YouTube channel. It is a unique and original work, not copied from any source. While AI tools may assist in formatting or narration, all stories are written by human creatives to reflect true emotions, values, and life situations.